More than 50 years after his tragic death, his sister has spoken out, revealing a truth that changes everything we thought we knew. Did Audie Murphy's death ever feel suspicious to you, type 1 if yes, or 0 if you've always believed it was just an accident? Because this is a truth buried in silence for decades. This video will give you new evidence. Audie Murphy was barely a man when he became a living legend. At just 19 years old, he held off an entire company of German soldiers alone, earning him the Medal of Honor and a place in history. But when he came home, he didn't stop. He became a movie star, starring in over 40 films, including To Hell and Back, the story of his own war experience. But behind the fame, behind the medals, was a man tormented by PTSD, survivor's guilt, and secrets he never shared. In 1971, at the age of 45, Audie Murphy died in a private plane crash near Roanoke, Virginia. Official reports blamed bad weather and pilot error, but those close to him never fully believed it. His widow Pamela and his siblings, including his younger sister Nadine, always felt there was more to the story. Audie wasn't reckless, Nadine once said. He was cautious, always aware, especially when it came to flying. So why was he in a poorly maintained aircraft? With a pilot who had a history of questionable decisions. Now, decades later, Nadine Murphy Lokey, the last surviving member of his immediate family, has finally spoken publicly. In a recent interview, she claimed that Audie was under pressure from unknown sources connected to Hollywood investors and political figures. She revealed that Audie had been trying to expose a financial scam involving high-profile studios and veterans' charities. And just weeks before the crash, she said he told her he felt he was being followed. He said something wasn't right. Nadine revealed, her voice trembling. He said if something happened to him, it wouldn't be an accident. Was it just paranoia fueled by trauma, or was he onto something? Audie Murphy fought for a country that praised him in public but let him suffer in silence. He slept with a loaded gun under his pillow, battled nightmares, and spoke openly about PTSD before the world was ready to listen. He used his platform to demand better care for veterans and made enemies in powerful places because of it. Was that the real reason his plane went down? Or was it truly a tragic, preventable accident that ended the life of a man who had already survived hell on Earth? Let's dive deeper into his nightmares and the answer for his death. He was born on June 20th, 1925 in Kingston, Texas, to a struggling family. Audie Murphy was the 7th of 12 children. His father was more renowned for disappearing than forgiving. One day, he arrived, and then he was gone. That left Audie at the age of 12 with no choice but to become the man of the family. He dropped out of school in the 5th grade and began picking cotton for $1 a day. Adjusted for today, that is around $23. That little money had to feed an entire family of siblings. It was a terrible life for a youngster, but there was no one else to do it. Then came the punch that changed him forever. Audie's mother Josie died of pneumonia and heart illness in 1941 when he was only 16. She was just 50, following that his 3 younger siblings were taken away and placed in an orphanage. Audie was left all alone. He never recovered from the loss. He once claimed that she carried part of me with her. I've been looking for it ever since. That emptiness remained with him, and he began to fill it in the only way he knew how, by putting himself in danger. He had already learned how to live before the army gave him a weapon. Hunger taught him how to shoot. With so few ammunition, each shot had to count. If he was absent, his siblings went hungry. He hunted rabbits and squirrels with a slingshot and borrowed a firearm. According to a neighbor, Audie never misses. His aim was so accurate that it became the one item in his life over which he had complete control. Later, the same talent would propel him to become one of World War II's most lethal troops. By the conclusion of the fight, he had killed at least 240 enemy troops. However, when he initially attempted to enroll, no one wanted him. He was too little and thin. He stood 5 feet 5 and weighed only 112 pounds. The Marines said no. The Navy said no. Even the Army did not want him in battle. They sought to send him to culinary school. But Audie wasn't about to cook eggs while others argued. His sister assisted him in forging a birth certificate to make him appear older. Eventually, the Army caved in. On June 30th, 1942, he signed up. He was only 17. The conflict provided him with something to aspire toward as well as an outlet for the sorrow he had been holding in for years. His first kills occurred in Sicily in July 1943. 2 Italian policemen on horseback attempted to flee. Audie eliminated both with 2 clean shots. He was 18. He had malaria the following week, but continued to battle. The sickness returned often during the conflict. He refused to spend significant periods of time in the hospital. He constantly returned to the front. In early 1944 at Anzio, Italy, he stepped into hell. Audie described it as a location where you felt like a fugitive from the law of averages. You knew your number would arrive shortly. On March 2nd, he crept through enemy fire, approached a German tank, and destroyed it with rifle grenades all by himself. This act earned him a Bronze Star, but more than medals, it revealed something more. He'd stopped being terrified. But nothing touched him like the loss of his dearest friend, Laddie Tipton. They were battling in France near a vineyard. 2 Germans hoisted a white flag and pretended to surrender. Tipton moved forward. They fired him down instantly. Something shattered inside Audie. He stormed the German position alone and continued firing until no one moved. He subsequently said, "I do not stop firing while there is still a quiver of life in them." That wasn't simply vengeance. It was sadness, wrath, and survival all in one. As the conflict progressed, Audie changed. While others wore out, he sharpened. Bullets didn't terrify him anymore. Officers say he was the best at assessing danger. Soldiers around him revered him while also fearing him. He didn't chat much and received very few letters. He was no longer simply a soldier. He had changed into something colder. When the army offered to make him an officer, he declined. He did not want to leave his guys behind. He even denied a promotion since he didn't want to put his fatigued unit through drills. Malaria reappeared again. He was hospitalized multiple times, including in Sicily, Naples, and again in March 1944. However, he continued returning to combat. On May 8, 1940, in Timor 4, he and 60 other members of Company B got the Combat Infantryman Badge. It was an honor for those who had gone through the worst of it, but Audie believed that no badge could undo the damage done by the war. It was January 26, 1945, near the quiet French village of Holtzwihr. The landscape was gripped by a harsh winter-frozen earth, barren trees, and the ever-present shadow of war. Among the snow-covered fields stood a young man named Audie Murphy, just 19 years old. What he did that day would become one of the most extraordinary acts of courage remembered from the Second World War. His unit, Company B of the 15th Infantry Regiment, had been nearly wiped out. Just the day before, 102 out of 120 men had been lost. Now, only a small band of 18 remained. Exhausted, outnumbered, and under-equipped, they faced an overwhelming force, 6 German tanks and approximately 250 enemy soldiers advancing toward them. There was no shelter. The ground was too frozen to dig proper cover. With the cold biting through their uniforms and the odds stacked against them, it seemed like hope had all but faded. But Audie Murphy made a decision in that moment that would defy logic and fear. As the enemy advanced, one of the few remaining American tank destroyers nearby, an M10, was hit and engulfed in flames. The crew evacuated, fearing it might explode at any second. But instead of retreating, Murphy did the unthinkable. He climbed onto the burning vehicle. Amidst the smoke and fire, he took control of the .50 caliber machine gun mounted atop the tank. Though flames licked the metal beneath his boots and enemy fire came from 3 sides, Murphy held his position. His leg was wounded by shrapnel, but he refused to yield. With a field radio in one hand, he called in artillery support, calmly directing the strikes as he manned the gun with the other. The situation was dire. Enemy soldiers closed in some as near as 10 yards. Yet Murphy stood firm, repelling wave after wave of advancing forces. For nearly an hour, he fought alone. One of his fellow soldiers, Private Anthony Abramsky, later recalled watching in disbelief. "I expected the whole thing to go up in flames under him at any moment," he said. But it never did. When the smoke finally cleared, an estimated 50 enemy soldiers had been killed or wounded. The rest began to retreat, tanks included, once their infantry support had been broken. Murphy, despite his injuries, had bought his company enough time to regroup and hold their position. He had turned what seemed like certain defeat into a miraculous stand. He nearly single-handedly repelled an entire opposing onslaught. The tanks were forced to flee when their infantry backup was destroyed. His own guys were startled. They believed they had just seen him die, but instead they saw something else, something that did not appear human. Murphy was wounded fatigued, yet as his soldiers advanced to continue the fight, he joined them from the front. Abramsky subsequently described it as the greatest exhibition of guts and fortitude he had ever witnessed. By the age of 21, Audie Murphy had accomplished something unprecedented in American history. He had 33 United States military medals, but only during World War II. He had every Combat Valor Award that was available at the time. Medal of Honor, Distinguished Service, crossed 2 Silver Stars, 2 Bronze Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts. He even had the Legion of Merit. That doesn't include the campaign ribbons with several combat stars or the foreign awards from France and Belgium. The French referred to him as a Chevalier of the Legion of Honor. They awarded him 2 Croix de Guerre medals. Belgium gave him the Croix de Guerre 1940 Palm, but he didn't show it off. He gave many away. The replacements are currently on display in a Dallas museum. Then there's the number that followed him about forever, 241. The United States Army credited Murphy with dealing with many enemy soldiers. Some estimate up to 250, including those killed by artillery he ordered. However, Murphy refused to discuss it. When a reporter inquired how they came up with the figure, he simply answered, "I'm not sure how they know. I didn't keep count. I do not want to know." Another time someone asked him how it felt. He said, "It didn't feel either way." Feelings were not a luxury in the infantry. He never brags about it. If anything, it weighed on him. He once observed, "The only thing I've ever discovered, I was good at is war, which is a terrible thing." How to him. Everything changed on July 16, 1945, when his visage appeared on the cover of Life magazine. That photograph of a youthful, freckled 21-year-old Texan immediately made him famous. When James Cagney saw Audie Murphy on the cover of Life magazine in July 1945, he saw more than just a combat hero. He saw promise. The photograph labeled Murphy as the most decorated soldier, which struck a chord with Cagney. He took Murphy to Hollywood, signed him to his production business, and offered him a fresh start in the movies. But everything immediately went apart. Despite the deal, the Cagney brothers never cast Murphy in a single part. In 1947, their agreement was terminated due to a disagreement. Murphy, now trapped in Hollywood, stayed at Terry Hunt's sports club. He did not feel like he belonged. He once stated that the film business felt artificial plastic and nothing like the war. Things started moving in 1948. He won a little role in Texas, Brooklyn in Heaven for $500, which is around $7,000 today. That position was not glamorous, but it was the start. Over the next 2 decades, Murphy featured in more than 40 films and 1 television show. But behind the scenes, he was silently unhappy. He never thought he had what it takes. Just before his death, he told a San Antonio reporter, "I had one hang-up as an actor. I had no talent." He stated it quite honestly. That is exactly what I told the filmmakers. They knew. I made the same movie 20 times. It was simple, but not really effective. His comments sliced through the Hollywood glitter like a knife. Murphy was not seeking stardom. He was surviving. Then came To Hell and Back, the picture that would permanently define him. It was released in 1955 and based on his memoirs. But Murphy did not want to portray himself. He expected the public to assume he was cashing in on his combat record. He even offered Tony Curtis as the lead, but nobody else could give it justice. The procedure almost broke him. Director Jesse Hibbs observed a significant disparity. In westerns, Murphy followed commands. But in this film, he became fixated on every detail. He showed the artists how to color craters so they appeared newly blasted. He scrutinized each soldier's outfit. He instructed the special effects crew on how explosions should seem because he has witnessed them in real life. Nonetheless, he despised how Hollywood cleaned it all up. He recalled the Battle of Anzio in the pouring rain. On the screen, there was sunshine. The Battle of the Colmar Pocket took place amid snow and muck, but in the picture everything was too clean and simple, and The Gap ate away at him. The public adored it. To Hell and Back became Universal Studios' highest-grossing release. It retained the title for 20 years until Jaws debuted in 1975. There was no romance or beautiful love tale, just one man's battle. Nevertheless, it made millions. But, as the box office was booming, Murphy broke down. He started experiencing nightmares again, the ones he thought he'd left behind in Europe. Historian Max Hastings subsequently described Murphy as a psychic disaster of colossal dimensions. Reliving those fights for a cinematic audience did not provide him comfort. It just exacerbated his scars. Finally, the film elevated him to legendary status. However, it also trapped him in a fabricated version of his existence. It was the Hollywood version, not his. And that is not the end of his story. Murphy was secretly writing music. Between 1962 and 1970, he co-wrote 18 country songs with composer Scudder. Their biggest hit, Shutters and Boards, was penned at Murphy's Ranch in 1962. It presented a narrative of pain and abandonment. The music hit a nerve. It was recorded by approximately 60 vocalists in various languages. Big names, too. Dean Martin, Jimmy Dean, and Porter Wagoner. A brief pause was followed by the beginning of another song. When Murphy commented, "When the wind blows in Chicago," he was referring to the time when he was listening to the wind howling outside his house in California. This particular stanza was then transformed into a ballad which was sung by Eddie Arnold and Dean Martin. An innate talent for rhyme and rhythm was possessed by him. He had written poetry while he was serving in the military, and one of them was included in his book. However, he assigned credit to a fictional soldier called Kerrigan for publishing the poem. At the same time that he was a movie star and a symbol of American bravery, Audie Murphy was a war hero. On the other hand, the majority of people were never privy to the fact that his life was fraught with tragedy, addiction, and emotional upheaval behind the scenes of the cameras and medals. His marriage to the aspiring actress Wanda Hendricks took place in 1949. She had fallen in love with the image on a magazine cover when she was 21 years old and full of optimism. Nevertheless, the guy she wed was more than simply a fighter. He has a broken moral compass. If Murphy was at home, he was in danger. He experienced traumatic flashbacks. He was unable to nod off. As he was engrossed in his recollections of the battle, he would occasionally hold Wanda at gunpoint. The media attempted to portray an image of a relationship that was ideal. She was referred to as his little Hendrix honey in the headlines. On the other hand, the truth was horrifying. In order to relocate to Texas, he requested that she leave Hollywood. However, his erratic moods and paranoia made it hard for him to have even a typical day. She once told me that when I was turning to kiss him, he had already left. He was not familiar with the individual who stood in his place. 7 months after they had tied the knot, she made a desperate attempt to escape. In April of 1950, she submitted a petition for divorce alleging mental mistreatment as the reason. After 1 year, it was finally completed. Murphy remarried later that same year, this time to Pamela Archer, who had previously worked as a nurse in the military and was now employed as a flight attendant. It appeared as though she was someone who might perhaps comprehend him. Terry was born in 1952, and Skipper was born in 1954. They each had 2 boys. Things appeared to be getting better for a time. On the other hand, a different sort of storm was being formed. The subject of religion became Pamela's obsession. She implemented stringent moral guidelines and transformed their house into a place where dread and judgment were prevalent. Immediately following the birth of their second son, she presented Murphy with a severe challenge. Have a separate life as you continue to be married, legally bonded, yet emotionally disconnected from the situation. It was still required of him to be a parent and to pay the bills, but at this point he was a stranger in his own personal space. He made every effort to safeguard his boys. In order to protect them from Pamela's radical ideas, he wished to protect them. However, the war had taken away significantly from him. Insomnia, nightmares, and mood swings that were difficult to predict were among symptoms he felt. Every night he slept with a firearm tucked beneath his pillow. There was no escape from the terror. His emotional numbness made it hard for him to form genuine connections with his children, despite his desire to be a decent father. In talks with the public, he referred to them as his delight. According to what he previously stated, "I believed that I would still be entirely content living as a hermit, even if I did not have Pam and the boys." But those little periods of warmth were never sustained. His traumatic experiences kept coming back to him. As the 1960s came to a close, Murphy had reached his breaking point. Although he had intended to divorce Pamela, he ultimately decided against it. As opposed to her, he did it for his boys. He dreaded the possibility of what might occur to them if he left. Thus, he remained. The garage, not the home, is where it is located. He transformed it into a living area and kept his residence there a secret. People from the outside world believed that the family was complete. On the other hand, Murphy was banished within that house. During the year 1971, he said that many were unaware that he was living in the garage. Despite his best efforts, he was little more than a phantom in the lives of his children all the time. He was having conversations with divorce attorneys right before he passed away. However, time was running short. It wasn't simply his family life that was ruined by Murphy's inner conflicts. In addition, they ruined his financial future. He lost everything as a result of his addiction to gambling. $3 million is the approximate amount that he lost. Currently, there are more than $20 million. It was not a casual situation. His wagers would go from 5 to 6 figures at a time. He pursued that high, maybe in an effort to recreate the adrenaline that he felt during battle. On the grounds that he did not wish to mislead younger supporters, he declined to endorse alcoholic beverages or tobacco products. On the other hand, an addiction that he was unable to manage was causing him to lose everything behind closed doors. Not only did his post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, affect his mental health, but it also led to him developing a deadly reliance on sleeping drugs. Through the use of a sedative, known as Placidil, he was able to put an end to that nightmare. In the 2 years that followed the conclusion of the war, he began taking medications. In the middle of the 1960s, the addiction grew so strong that he decided to break it by isolating himself in a hotel room for a week in order to get away from it. Even though he was sweating, shivering, and maybe even hallucinating, he persevered through everything because he desired to be rid of it. It came dangerously close to taking his life. On the other hand, that is how desperately he wanted to take charge of his life. Despite this, the worry never went away. A loaded .45 caliber handgun was always tucked under his pillow before he went to sleep each night. The legendary Western film actor Gary Cooper had given it to me as a present. Murphy, however, did not consider it to be a memento. It served as a shield. There was a time when his first wife had awoken with it staring directly at her face. In hotel rooms, he continued to practice the habit. There was never a location that seemed secure. He believed that the conflict had never come to an end. By 1968, Audie Murphy's career in the film industry had completely collapsed. Just a few short years ago, he was considered to be one of the most famous actors in Hollywood. In the past, he would make $100,000 for each picture. But suddenly, he was being given a sum as low as $20,000. As soon as the producers saw how desperate he was, they reduced their offers. It didn't matter to them that he was the most decorated military hero in the history of the United States. It was merely a fading star that they noticed. Murphy was adamant about not accepting any easy money. Big offers were presented by corporations that deal in alcoholic beverages and cigarettes. He, however, declined their offer. He had stated that he could not do that to the children. Before money, he prioritized his morals. Whispering Smith, his television show, had already been a failure by the year 1961. It wasn't until the late 1960s that the phone stopped ringing. An office in the basement of a hotel served as the location for his production firm. It wasn't until 1982, 11 years after his death, that his final film, A Time for Dying, was finally released in the United States. This was due to the fact that it had so many financial issues. Murphy described the experience as being similar to that of a prostitute who is a bit late in life. He witnessed the deterioration of his dignity. Things went from bad to worse. Murphy began pursuing high-risk business opportunities in order to ensure his own survival. In 1967, he put practically all of his wealth, which amounted to $260,000, into an oil enterprise in Algeria. Following the outbreak of the Six-Day War, the whole investment was completely wiped away in a single night. His heart was broken. As early as 1971, he was actively seeking for any chance that would help him get out of debt. Even more remarkably, he sold his cherished property to Bob Hope. Nevertheless, the money did not last. He devoted his days to making a never-ending stream of phone calls pleading for bargains that may perhaps rescue him. Because he wanted to be closer to his boys, he was living in a garage which was a distance from his wife. The man who had previously battled Nazis was now fighting creditors' debts and bankruptcy all at the same time. As if that weren't enough, the authorities also targeted him for their own purposes. An inquiry into taxes that were not paid was initiated by the Internal Revenue Service. Murphy was forced to acknowledge that he owed a significant amount of money when he filed for bankruptcy in the year 1968. It really was embarrassing. The same government that had earned him 28 medals and pinned them to his breast was now harassing him for money. He compared it to the terrible experience of dying in a battlefield. The loss of oil, the failure of the movie career, and the failure of the investments were all elements that contributed to this fatal blow. In addition, there was no pause. Later on, a buddy of Murphy's estimated that he had lost around $3 million over the course of his gambling career. It all came to a total. It was too late for him, and he was in a difficult situation. He persisted in his efforts. A business trip to Virginia was scheduled for him on May 28, 1971, and he boarded a twin-engine Aero Commander 680 Super for the journey. In the hopes of securing a new business arrangement, he was going with 5 other companions. Atlanta's DeKalb Peachtree Airport served as the departure point for the trip. It had been anticipated that it would take less than 2 hours. They continued despite the fact that the sky did not appear to be in good shape. There was no flight plan submitted. Nobody anticipated that there would be problems. However, problems appeared very immediately. On paper, Herman Lavelle Butler, the pilot, appeared to be an excellent candidate. There were 8,000 hours of flying. A catch, however, was present. Only 6 hours were allotted to him in that particular sort of aircraft. Even worse, he did not have an instrument rating. Therefore, he was not permitted to fly through fog, rain, or clouds under any circumstances. He was perplexed as to how. On top of that, it is precisely what they arrived at. The weather became very lethal. Condensed fog. Clouds that are affixed to the mountains. There is just a 3-mile visibility range. A total lack of visibility was present in the Blue Ridge Mountains, in spite of the fact that the conditions demanded comprehensive instrument training. Butler attempted to fly completely by sight. He was unable to make it. Regardless, he continued on. Additionally, there was a time when he attempted to land on a roadway close to Galax, Virginia. At a height of only around 150 feet above the ground, the plane was observed flying about and avoiding trees. After that, it made a sharp left to the west and headed directly into the mountains. Approximately 2,700 feet above the ground, the aircraft crashed into Brush Mountain at 12:08 p.m. There was a tremendous collision. It was an instantaneous death for everyone on board. It was thrown upward from the debris that Murphy's body was found in. An accident scene caught fire. In order to locate it, it took 3 days. This caused search planes to move more slowly. Furthermore, because there was no flight plan that had been submitted, nobody even knew where to search. In the course of the search, 31 aircraft were utilized. 4 miles up rough mountain terrain was where the debris was discovered when it was discovered. The conclusions of the National Transportation Safety Board were made public 1 year after the incident. What is the reason? When the weather called for instrument guidance, Butler continued to conduct his flight according to visual standards. In that plane, he lacked both the expertise and the experience necessary to fly it. Even though Butler had already been involved in an aircraft disaster the previous year, it did not help. During the month of March in 1970, both of his engines failed because he ran out of gasoline. At that time, he had also attempted to land on a roadway, but he had been unsuccessful. It ought to have been a massive warning sign all along. However, no one deterred him from taking another flight. A flurry of conspiracy ideas emerged in the aftermath of the tragedy. Some others believed that it was an act of sabotage. Some others felt that the government had murdered Murphy in order to shut him up. In the past, he had been vocal about the rights of veterans as well as his own abuse. However, none of the hypotheses were proven to be correct. Murphy's family did not remain stationary for long. His wife Pamela has filed a lawsuit for $10 million against 13 different parties, including Colorado Aviation, the pilot's estate, and other individuals. Damages of $2.5 million were granted to the family by a jury after a lengthy period of 4 years. That is around $14.6 million in today's currency. According to the decision of the court, Colorado Aviation was negligent. They had disallowed a pilot who lacked the necessary qualifications to operate a complex aircraft under hazardous situations. Every single conspiracy theory was disproved as a result of the case. If there had been any kind of deception, it would have been revealed over the course of the trial. However, there was not. Nothing except defeat and defeat. Arlington National Cemetery was the location where Murphy was laid to rest on June 7, 1971. He requested that he not be given any special treatment or a gilded headstone, but rather the standard white monument that is given to every soldier. Furthermore, it is precisely what he was given. His grave receives thousands of visitors each year. Because there were so many people who came to visit his grave, the administrators at the cemetery had to construct a route that went around the tree that provides shade. On his gravestone, his medals are all listed. A Distinguished Service, Cross Medal of Honor. 2 silver stars and 3 Purple Hearts were awarded to the recipient. The cemetery offered to enhance it with a gold leaf to honor his prominence, but the family declined the offer before it could be implemented. Certainly, he would not have desired that. What do you believe, Type 1, if you think Audie's death deserves reinvestigation, or 0 if you think it was simply a tragic end to a tragic life? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the stories they tried to keep buried. Because the truth doesn't stay quiet forever, and neither do we.